Guys, thank you so much for having taken the time to have joined our webinar today. We understand that this is a time when all of us have to be essentially working together. This is an unprecedented challenge that we are thrown with. And today's webinar agenda is essentially to help administrators get on track, all right, face this specific unprecedented challenge of all of a sudden starting to work from home and going forward from there. That is very much the agenda. As we speak, there are multiple new regulations coming in. Countries all over the world are implementing a lockdown. And in fact, in the US, as we speak, the lockdown is confirmed till April 30th. So I'm pretty sure a lot of organizations did not get prepared enough because there was not enough heads up. Basically, we were never really ready for this. Not just the information, but the whole idea of having resources in place, having all the necessary tools in place. That was a big challenge, and that is a big challenge for a lot of organizations trying to adapt to remote work all of a sudden. But given the fact that there's already an adoption towards cloud applications, it has to be, to an extent, a little easy for the administrators. So we'll get straight to the webinar. The agenda is very straightforward. What we intend to do through today's webinar is to give you tools, give you tips, essentially for identity access administrators, because you are the front line of your IT security as we speak. Your entire cybersecurity right now depends on how strong your IAM practices are, and that's exactly what we are going to help you manage and secure. So it's going to be must and bust tools. I have to thank you guys for having taken the time. I understand a lot of you must have friends and relatives who might be having tough times. The webinar is being recorded as well, just in case, guys. If you have to cater to something, don't feel pressured. We'd be more than happy to send out the copy of the webinar. People at Redmond would be able to help you get a copy of the webinar and the slide deck. That being said, let's quickly get into addressing how do we go about managing the work from home crisis right now. So as we see, this is an unprecedented shift. Like I told you, a lot of your employees must have started accessing your internal resources from remote. And another big challenge right here is enabling all of them to do it and giving them the same level of business continuity and effortless access as they used to have before. It's obvious that your business is going to take a hit to a certain extent, but then we want to go one step further and see how we can flatten the curve, as they're calling it. While we social distance, how do we also ensure your business goes on? So we are going to talk about a couple of aspects of helping employees self-serve themselves. This is not something new to our employees or users in general in our organization, because for a long time, they've been used to the idea of self-service in different ways. If I were to be giving you an example, self-service in terms of them trying to access their Google account or Facebook account when they forget their passwords. They do a self-reset, answer a couple of security questions, and go forward. So in a lot of ways, you don't necessarily need to reinvent the wheel and start educating them right from ground zero. You can very much start from a point considering that they are willing to start to work from home and they are willing to take up productivity tools or best practices that you lay down. I understand. And in fact, today, I'd want to give you a couple of real-time examples that we here at Zoho Managed Engine are doing. We are about 7,000 employees big across the world, working in the United States, working in India, working in Japan, and a lot of other countries around the world, about 7,000 people, all of them working remotely. Now, you as an administrator and an IT leader would absolutely understand the difficulty in getting your entire org to move work from home overnight. So that is what we want to address right here. The fundamental problem that we are facing right now is getting our users to do what we ask them to do. There's a lot of noise out there. Amidst all the trouble, it's actually difficult to get the communication right and ask them to follow a couple of security best practices. It could be something as simple as a check-in email that you want to send your users and ask for feedback, saying if they're able to access their resources. But most of the time, it turns out they aren't very responsive. You can't really blame them. So what you need to really consider right now is your identity security and how do you go forward managing it. Because here, you can't necessarily fully trust your users. As we speak, if it were a case where your users accessing your internal resources from within your local area network, you're very much sure that you have enough security best practices, you have the best in class firewall rules, you have the best in class SIM solution to detect a problem. But now your users can very much access your internal resources from a public network, from their home networks, and they cannot be as secure as you think. And this is publicly available information. Almost every attacker or hacker out there knows that your users have started working from home. So what do you do about it? So I'm going to quickly get into the agenda of today's session and help you address a couple of challenges. We're going to be talking about two things. One, productivity for your users and ensuring business continuity for your employees. And number two, how do you do it securely as we speak about it. So these two are the key directions in which we'll be headed. I'll be walking you through 6 tips that can essentially help you supercharge your identity access management for remote work. The first one is going to be helping your users serve themselves. So this is basically a management move to reduce or lessen the burden that your employees have. Or administrators and IT help desk technicians have to be precise. So there's an overwhelming number of calls because the first 3 or 4 days when we started working from home, our system administrators and IT folks were the ones that had to work round the clock. In fact, they had to stay back, do shifts, do rotations till the whole thing got figured out. So we are talking about IT administrators being overwhelmed. What about the innumerable number of requests? A lot of people who never really got in touch with the IT are getting in touch with IT for the first time. And this time it's a little difficult because one, they cannot walk up to the administrator and ask for a solution. So helping them self-serve themselves is the first thing that you'll need to have in mind. So look for any process, look for any solution in any aspect of your IT management that can essentially help your users starting to self-serve themselves. That's the first tip that I have for you. And through the webinar, we'll be addressing this in detail. We'll be talking about how do you do this securely, right? So here again, the challenge is identity thievery, someone trying to impersonate. How do you stop that? We'll be talking about a couple of ways to help your remote workers stay safe. We'll be talking about keeping track of their activity from 2 perspectives. One, from the productivity standpoint as to how do they go about logging in your resources? How do they go about their entire day? Which time is the maximum load right there? You can optimize your resources like this. And the next part of it is going to be for you to be able to audit the whole thing as well. So as you go about auditing it, there needs to be some level of intelligence associated with it. I get to the point why I ask you to have an intelligent auditing or an user behavior analytics module for that matter. So this might sound a little complex, but then guys, stay along with me. We are going to break this down, keep it as simple as possible, and try and understand action items. And when it comes to giving them the same level of access to critical resources, how do you do that? And finally, from an administrator standpoint, you would want to also factor into the equation that you yourselves would be required to work from home. You aren't at the comfort of your office to access a couple of servers or do a couple of operations or be in touch with your Active Directory or any other system for that matter. You as well are working remotely. So how do you empower yourself? So how do you empower your users? How do you stay secure? How do you empower yourselves? That's the agenda for today's session. As we go about the whole remote working, we kind of see a trend right here. Attackers are trying to take advantage of the situation because all that the attackers care about is behavioral patterns, and now there's a huge deviation from usual behavioral pattern, and therefore your users are very much prone to making mistakes as they go about accessing your resources. When I say mistakes, 1 or 2 security glitches, it could be something that is pretty simple, but then you might end up facing the heat right now. So how do we go about securing our identity and access management? Because we understand right now your identity security is actually your first line of security, as all your workers are on the go. In fact, you can start treating your identities of your users as endpoints itself. So that's the kind of consideration that I want you to make. Attackers see that as well. So what do you do? So Microsoft came out with this timeline right here. This is a little disturbing, and looking at it at this point in time is important for us to acknowledge that our existing systems or IAM systems, be it Active Directory or other associated Microsoft identity systems, they aren't safe. They aren't as safe as they're supposed to be, because all that an attacker would need is just one account to be compromised, and even before you know, your entire security can come crumbling. In just 2 days, matter of 2 days, 48 hours, they can get into your Active Directory and do a complete recon, find out what are the critical resources, and start exfiltrating data. The worst part is, right now, if such an attack or an exfiltration happens, it's going to be absolutely difficult for administrators to keep a tab or get an alert when something of that sort is happening. It becomes easy for the attacker to go through the whole process without triggering a flag. So how do you start working right here? Make this shift in your consideration, because as we see, even before we started working remotely, majority of data breaches took months to discover. I'm pretty sure you'd want to make this one concession. As your employees are starting to work remotely, take into consideration that an attacker could already lurk in your system, that an attacker could already be present in your system, or must have already compromised your security and be inside your system. There's no surefire way to ensure 100% security while you guys are working from home, while your employees are working from home. So take that into consideration and start treating identity security with priority, because we see a major rise in phishing attacks that are happening. And now, of all times, attackers are taking advantage of the situation. What am I talking about? So attackers out there are sending emails to your users that look absolutely legit, that is addressed from the CDC or from the World Health Organization, and turns out it is a malicious email. They get you to download malware. They get your users to click on phishing sites and probably even give away some critical credentials. So how do you go about educating your users to not fall prey for this? That is the question right here, because hackers have identified the hard part of deception. They also see the opportunity. They sound to be extremely legitimate. They pretend to be some authority or a body pertaining to giving away news regarding COVID. So as a best practice, you can start by advising your users to not open or receive any emails that say COVID or Corona in the email. So you could I can give you a quick tip right here. If you're talking about an Office 365 organization, you can use e-discovery. Have that in mind. I'm going to be giving a lot of tips as I go through, quick tips here and there. So make note of them. E-discovery is something that you can look for, and set filters for any emails that have the words Corona or virus or COVID in them, just to ensure that you keep a tab on what information is being shared. So do that. So it all is essentially to take control over the accounts, which is account takeover. The first step for an account takeover is to get access to their accounts, right? So identity security again comes into the picture. So how do you prevent your attacker from taking over accounts? That's the critical question that we want to answer right here. Going forward, a simple rule is going to be to keep track of logon activity. Why would I say this? So this would fundamentally alter every aspect of your identity security in terms of being able to quickly be in the know if an attack like a brute force is happening. If someone is working in the non-business hours, if you want to quickly check, because we're not just talking about attackers from outside, we're even talking about insiders. Now that they're working from remote, a lot of organizations are adapting or giving in to making your security a little weaker, compromising your security for the betterment of usability. So we are talking about organizations compromising their security for better usability for users. So here and there, I can give you one example. I was talking to a customer a while back, and then they were telling me that for their password reset problems, they've increased the password age from their usual expiry date, let's say 2 months to 3 months, just to ensure that there are no password reset requests. Is this the right thing to do? what do you do right? This isn't the right thing to do, because as such you're being attackers are out there trying to get in, and you don't want to make your security any weaker. So starting with something as simple as a logon activity monitoring can go a long way. So I've listed a couple of points like brute force attacks, like non-business hours, and trying to keep tab of remote desktop activity and island hopping. What I'm going to do is, through the course of the webinar, I'll still be covering all these points and how do you address them. So keep track of logon activity. I can give you an example. I'll just break down the first point for you. If it's a brute force attack, if you have a very strong logon activity monitoring system, a brute force attack would look like multiple repeated logon failures followed by one successful logon. If you were to look at it individually as two separate events, as multiple logon failures, and then later one logon, you would not be able to make sense. So look for solutions that correlate and get your identity security in place. So we're talking about identity administrators being in the front line to protect organizations from attacks like this. So I'll go forward and speak about a couple of other points, because authentication is something that is being spoken about a lot. In my point of view, honestly, as we speak, just taking help of modern authentication isn't going to help. They're definitely faster, they make it more secure, but then again, you'll have to factor into the consideration things like hardware requirements. You can't suddenly, all of a sudden, get into picture a biometric system as a second factor of authentication. What do you do? So start looking for second factors of authentication that work in favor. But then beyond all of that, the first and foremost, I would say, the defense system for your identities is having proper password management or proper password policies. So how do you go about doing that? Because we understand as we speak, passwords, Active Directory passwords aren't the strongest out there. Most of the people who are joining me today, most of enterprises out there are Active Directory organizations, and how do they go about securing the organization? So that's the question right here. Though passwords are strong, they can be encrypted, they're cost efficient, you don't need additional software, you still need to take into consideration a couple of drawbacks that are associated with passwords, but still better because they are compatible. Though you go online, though you go cloud, though you go hybrid right now as we speak, you still need Active Directory password. So we understand that this is inevitable and that password security is your priority right here. How do you go about doing this? You can start with quickly fixing the loopholes. There are multiple shortcomings that AD password policies have. A lot of us administrators have known this for a very long time, but still haven't had the time to act on it or haven't had the resources to act on it. You have a couple of options like default domain policy. You have the fine-grained password policy, but is it as fine-grained as it claims? These inbuilt provisions do not help you save yourself from an attack. We are talking about a one-size fits type of approach for all the passwords that are out there. All the password policies are structured like this. What do we do about that? When we talk about users trying to set incremental passwords of all time, now is when your users need to set strong passwords. So how do you get your users to not set a password like password at 123, and when they're asked to reset, they just add a 4 to it? They keep setting incremental passwords. And then dictionary attacks can become quite easy right now. There are multiple dictionaries out there. There are a lot of organizations whose securities are compromised. So as we speak, we have news that there are multiple health institutions and organizations out there that are the target of attackers right now. There is tons and tons of health record, and think about the chaos, the disruption that it would cause to right now, because they are in the front line trying to solve this whole problem, trying to fight this whole problem. And if there is a hiccup right there, that could multiply, that could have like a very terrible domino effect and could completely crumble the whole health system right now. So how do we tackle that? We want to stop any sort of attack from an identity standpoint. That's something that we can do best, and let's go about doing it. So if we trust our users, we don't really end up being benefited right here, because we know how users are. You give them best practices, they're still going to try to find the easiest way possible, the easiest way in possible. Example, the classic one, they write their passwords on a piece of paper and have it stuck on top of their desktops. What do we do at those times? We would want our users to be a little smart. But then the question right here is, them trying to get better usability of your security system. That's the problem. So how do you give them self-service? So first tip for the day for IAM administrators and IAM leaders is self-service for password management. So empower your tele workers to be able to reset their own passwords, because as we see it, the majority of the problem, in at least with respect to our companies, we've got about 7,000 employees. Like I told you, they no longer connected to the local area network, and then when they forget their password or they're supposed to reset their password, they're not able to do it, and without a second thought they give a call to the administrator. So they lift the phone, they give a call to the administrator. What do you do right now? So what if you can empower them with a console, a simple web console, from where they can very much go about authenticate themselves, proving that who they claim, proving to be who they claim to be, and then going forward and giving them the provision to do all of this at the comfort of their home, with security as well in mind. We'll be talking about that. And then empowering your users to reset their passwords from their devices. That can also be facilitated. It be a simple application on their Android or iOS, you still get them to do that. And then finally, another major problem with respect to password management is being a little proactive at the situation and trying to notify them in advance about an impending password reset. This should definitely save a lot of trouble, let alone self-service. But if you can get your users to reset their passwords right on time, that should save a lot of trouble. So how do we go about doing this? Simple as this. You can have a dashboard configured for your users, give them the provision to do a couple of options that they'd be doing if they were at work as well, being able to reset their passwords and unlocking their accounts. Now, you can play this a little smart by selectively enabling this functionality for a specific set of users. So if you want a couple of people or certain accounts with privileges to not have this option right now, so that an attacker can take advantage of the situation, you can very much exclude those privileged accounts of the self-service and do the manual way. So how do you go about doing this? Pretty simple. Give them the access right where they want to see it. Right at the login screen is where they want to reset their password and unlock their accounts. So you could do this remotely. Even if you've already started working from home, you can very much do this remotely by a simple MDM push. If your organization already has one, you could very much do that. You could get the endpoints to have the tool lets you set up this functionality on every login screen. It could be a Windows organization, or it could be iOS or Mac organization or a Linux organization. You could very much get them to have the reset password and unlock button pop up right at the logon. So what we are going to do is, towards the end of the webinar, we're going to let you make requests, just in case if you want our team to help you set this up. We'd be more than happy to help you do this. So being able to set this up right at the logon is quite important. And if you were to ask me what's the background behind this, how does it work, though your remote users are no longer inside your organization's premise, how does this work? It's pretty simple. It starts with a VPN that's being pre-configured that does a handshake with the tool that we're discussing today, AD360. So right at the login screen, your users can make a request for a password reset. They'd be prompted with a couple of security questions or challenges or second factors of authentication to verify their identity. So you must be having a question right now. So how does this work? What's the requirement right here? The only requirement that we ask for is active connection to the internet, because the application right here is pointed to the internet. And even if they are logging into their desktops, they could, since they could do all of this right at the logon, it should not be a problem at all. Just being able to connect it to the internet is the only requirement that your tool must be requiring. So right after the request is sent, there's a couple of validation that happens, and some bit of authentication through security and challenge questions happens. And from there, it goes all the way to Active Directory through a very secure VPN. And from there, it comes back after a successful password reset and gets overwritten in your existing cache credentials. So it's as simple as that. And from there on, it's quite straightforward. You must be having just one question. How do your cache credentials also get verified? That too goes through the VPN, gets attested in Active Directory, comes back and gets overwritten. So both your cached credentials get renewed and your password reset request is answered at the same time. So for telecommuters, they can have all of this done. It looks very complex, but then for a user, it's going to be effortless, as simple as getting to just the login screen, clicking on this one button right here, and being able to access all these functionalities without a problem. So that's the beauty of setting up telecommuters or setting up a self-service right at the login. So this is something that you'll need to look at. So if you're able to achieve this, then that would bring down majority of your help desk calls, as we see we are on the rise right now. And when it comes to securing the whole transaction, you'd want to be extra cautious. The following just listed right here are pre-built and supported into the tool. And just in case if you want to support another VPN, that can also be done. So look for solutions that do this. And then as we go about doing the whole remote password management, there are also chances of attacks that could get initiated. What if an attacker tries to do a password spray to all your remote user accounts and somehow cracks into one of these accounts? So now it becomes easy because the attackers can go absolutely under the radar because you've already enabled remote login for a lot of users. So this becomes difficult. So strengthen your existing password policies. That is my next recommendation for you. We understand that Active Directory password policies aren't good enough. I know that's a shocker, but then that's the truth. So we'd want to go one step further and strengthen our existing password policies. This does not just apply to AD. It can even be to your Azure AD or any other IAM system that you're using. But generally, if you want to strengthen your password policy, look at a solution that would sit on top of your existing password policies and make it a tad bit stronger. So one example right here is the password policy strengthener that sits on top of active password policies. Lets administrators configure certain restrictions to start with stopping users from using dictionary words. So now this can be a major benefit for administrators because they can very much use a dictionary that's already pre-configured and that's updated dynamically from the tool, or they can choose their own dictionary and kind of stop a dictionary attack from propagating. So this is kind of reverse engineering the whole idea of a dictionary attack. Stop users from setting passwords that have words from the dictionary, or stop your users from using patterns that are predictable. Of all times, now is when you'd want to have this implemented because users are very, very predictable. There are 400 or 500 odd behavioral patterns that are listed. We got that list of possible patterns that users would adopt to when you ask them to set passwords. So attackers are also aware. Bots are quite sensitive. Bots are quite strong. They can initiate an attack of this sort very easily and get away with it. So you can stop your users from having any of those passwords set. So if your question is how do you enforce all this, it's pretty simple. Since it's tied with Active Directory, you can initiate a password read from to all your users and ask them to set the passwords as you require them to. Stronger passwords as they start working from home. Stop them from using patterns. Stop them from using dictionary words. Stop them from using words from previous passwords. This is stopping them from using incremental passwords, no letters from the previous password. So that makes it a little difficult for them, but definitely does reduce the probability of an attacker taking control of your account. On top of all this, all right, the best part is all of this gets implemented and is made visible right at the login. So that's the kind of tool that you'll be needing to looking for right now. On top of all this, if you're still concerned, you can always resort to an integration like this where what we've done is we've got the Have I Been Pawned integration, where this is a website that aggregates all possible passwords that are out there that have been exposed and that are consolidated day in, day out as we speak by the hour into a database which can be cross-referenced so that your users can never set a password that has been exposed in any of the attacks. So this does save a lot of trouble because none of the exposed passwords, even if your users have been exposed somewhere else, they can still not choose to set the same password because your users tend to have this habit of setting the same password across different platforms. You can stop them from setting such passwords because there's this Have I Been Pawned integration. So the second tip that I have for you is to being able to secure your remote logon with multi-factor authentication. So as you do it, something that you'll need to take into consideration is cross-system. So you don't want to stop just with application level multi-factor authentication. You'd also want to take into consideration the possibility of doing MFA for your Windows logon, for your Linux logon, and how do you do it? It could be as simple as doing a TFA right at the logon. So for you to be able to achieve it, you'd need a couple of options. To start with, you'd want to consider using options like an OTP right at the logon, something that we sent to your email, or maybe a Google Authenticator would greatly help, or maybe something as simple as a fingerprint ID or a face ID for your end user. So look for tools that does multi-factor authentication right at the logon. So that's my next recommendation for you, having MFA set at the logon. So this can be a game changer, because even if an attacker somehow compromised your user's credentials, somehow got access to your system, they excuse me, they'd still not be able to go any further without the second factor of authentication. In fact, I'm going to give you a quick example right here. Let's say the administrator account is compromised for security right here, all right? The password right here of the administrator is compromised. The attacker tries to log in into the administrator account, but unfortunately, or fortunately for the organization, the attacker is not able to go any further, because there's this second factor of authentication where it's an email verification that is sent to the administrator's ID. So without the second factor, the attacker will not be able to proceed further, and this is right at the logon. So this is just one example of a second factor. There could be multiple other factors that you could take into consideration. You could have one-time password sent as text messages, but I'm not a big advocate of OTP sent to your mobile. That's not foolproof either. Look for factors that are personal, maybe Touch ID and Face ID and options. So if you're a Microsoft organization and using Office 365 already, then it shouldn't be a problem, because you would be able to use Microsoft Authenticator for free and have it set up for your users. In fact, as we speak, there's another recommendation that I want to give you guys right now. Look up for Secure Score. Secure Score is a Microsoft dashboard that will give you a complete analysis of your existing Office 365 AD infrastructure and tell you where are the loopholes, how exactly can you stop your users from causing trouble to your organization, how exactly can you make your security posture better, how exactly can you assign the right licenses to the right users, give accesses in the right privilege, entitlement management, multi-factor being set, or any other security best practice associated. You can very much get that under the Secure Score dashboard. So Secure Score dashboard is what you'll need to look for, and that will save a lot of trouble for you. Another recommendation that I want to go forward with is the password expiry notification. So through and through, we've been talking about being able to set stronger passwords, being able to give your users the provision to notice what is the password policy that you set for them. And the next one is going to be for you to be able to save yourself of another trouble, which is asking your users to reset their passwords right at expiry. Now, come on, what's the inbuilt Microsoft way of doing this? It's a pop-up. The pop-up tells the user needs to reset their password, but then the users never really care. They never really oblige to your request. So this is something that you'll have to consider. So how do you ensure that you push the right notification to your users? It could be a notification that's sent via email, a notification that's sent via SMS, or it could even be a notification that's sent via push message. So we're talking about being able to stay on top of your system and notifying your users in every possible platform, because there's already too much noise out there. So it's as simple as sending them out a text notification saying they'll need to reset their passwords. Or it could be as simple as sending out an email notification and notifying them in as many number of platforms as possible. So here, the crux right here is to notify them number of times and in more frequency. So look for a tool that does password expiry notification in this time span, 1 month before the expiry, 15 days before the expiry, 7 days before the expiry, or even 3 days or 1 day prior to the expiry. You can notify them. And trust me, the major problem that administrators and help desk technicians face right now is password resets and impending password expiry. So get your users to speed them to do their resets on their own, and that could save a lot of trouble. So I've done some basic math for you. So in an organization like Zoho, where we've got 7,000 employees, we have crazy loads of influx of just for password resets. And as we see it, there are about 30% of the calls that the help desk receives as we speak today are for password resets and account unlock. So considering with let's say 500 employees big, on an average, they're bound to receive 21 calls in a year from a single employee. But now the volume is at least 2 times or 3x more than that. So think about the number of calls that your help desk is going to receive just for this, and think about the number and productivity that's lost. So your organization, if you were to convince your organization, this is the metric that you'll probably be needing to give them, right? Or if you're a decision maker, please take a look at this. Twice about having a password expiry tool given to them, a notifier given to them, a self-service tool given to them. So that is the idea that I want to drive across. And you can never be too safe as you go through this. There could be some level of problems associated with your hackers successfully trying to install a malware system. So how do you go about catering to that? You set stronger passwords to rebut that, but then again, the problem is you compromise the accessibility for your users. You make it difficult for the hackers and you make it difficult for your users as well, because they don't access just one account, but they have, let's say, 10 identities across platforms. And now a lot of you must be using Teams. A lot of your users should be using Office 365 or G Suite or any other productivity app or so on and so forth that enable communication, that enable collaboration. So how do you expect your users to remember or not set weak passwords for those platforms as well? So as a best practice, you can set up a single sign-on dashboard. Associate all of these accounts with just one master account that has all the security that you want the account to have. All sorts of rules and regulations need to be applied to this account. And if you can have a single sign-on dashboard preferably associated with your Active Directory, that is a great way to ensure extraordinary security for all those applications. So it becomes effortless because users can continue using their own passwords. They don't need to key in their password anywhere. They don't fall prey for a phishing attack or for a phishing page where they try to enter their credentials and lose their credentials. Pre-configure all of this integration for your users and give them the provision to access any of the application system, right? Or any application that supports a SAML 2.0. A single sign-on dashboard is something that you'll need to look for. So we wanted to speak about multi-factor authentication as a security best practice. Again, single sign-on does help with both productivity and security. So take consideration of implementing a single sign-on and MFA solution in this specific scenario. The next one that I want to talk about is productivity of your entire organization. So just the management that's concerned about the whole business going effortlessly and smoothly, though you're working from home, but also there are line managers who want to know how their employees or how their subordinates are working. They want to keep track of productivity. So this is more like an added value. I mean, value that you can add to your organization in terms of as we go working remotely. I'm really sorry. As we go working remotely. So this is something that you can take into consideration. So how do you keep track of remote employees' productivity? You already have access to their logs, to their Active Directory activity, to their screen time, to the whole deal of activities that are associated with them, from having logged into the laptop to having. There are a couple of options right here. You'd want to monitor your employees' attendance. That's something that you can help your HR with as they are working their homes. If your organization does not have a strong, let's say, a HCM tool, this can double up as a HCM tool or human capital management tool. You can keep track of their working hours, guidelines as to when to work, because you'd not want them to be working at random hours. You don't want to pressure your resources, so you can look at it and boost performance as well. And then on top of all of this, if you're able to track their login activity as they do it remotely, there is a high chance that you can also monitor their logon activity if they're doing something malicious. It can be an insider attack. It can be an external hacker trying to log in. And if there's anything malicious that is happening about the whole thing, you can very much notify them of what is wrong, or notify the administrator of malicious intent. And through, we are talking about reducing friction and making it easy for administrators and managers as well, likewise. So you can have out of the box for attendance that are based out of Active Directory logging and log off. It also factors into consideration idle hours. It's not just logging in and logging off and considering working hours. It's also idle hours. How long does the screensaver is on, how long is the laptop or endpoint or desktop left idle. All of that gets taken into consideration while calculating the attendance report for your HR. You could very much give your HR a backup right here. And then when we talk about users who try to move laterally, or attackers who try to get as much as access as possible. So we are shifting from productivity to security right here. So as attackers try to snoop in, try to get access at one touch point, and they go about extending their access to more and more devices, because most of us are logging in remotely, and remote login is as not as we consider. And even before you know, your domain admin credential could be compromised. The exact same scenario where we were discussing the Microsoft infographic a while back. So we will need to take into consideration the possibility of a remote attack that's done, and the attacker tries to move literally control of your entire infrastructure. So take that into consideration. We have a lot of administrators around the world. We ran this survey even before the advent of this whole chaos. We were able to run a survey among 500 administrators, and we took note, and most of them agree that employees somehow fall prey for an attack of this sort. It could be impersonation attack. It could be an attack that is as simple as a phishing email. So you would need to stay on top of it. And if you want to keep a track of how is this not an attacker, how do you draw the line of difference between them being an attacker or a user? Because there's anomalous activity as we speak happening as your users are tending to work from home for the first time. They could be doing a lot of things that you never expected them to do. So how do you draw the line? How do you do a dynamic analysis and not just work based on thresholds? Because your security tool might be giving you away a lot of false indicators, which is something that you can't really accommodate at this point in time. So have a system that does user behavior analytics. Look for a solution that can very much pack in identity security for your identities by analyzing their normal behavior, by drawing a baseline for this specific time span, and figuring out how they work. Most of them are from home, right? So the system proactively starts understanding that the user's new geographic location is different, the IP address is different, the device from where they're logging in is different, and factors all of this in to draw a baseline for the users. And when there's an unusual log activity, let's say from a different geography, right? We call it superhuman travel. There's a logon activity happening at, let's say, 12 p.m. from California, and all of a sudden there's a login at 12:30 p.m. that's happening from Nigeria. So this is an impossible travel. So that gets factored in, and we try to keep as possible because we don't want to give away false positives. So look for solutions that do user behavior analytics on identities and track unusual activity on the count, unusual activity on the time. And if there are any new resources that are accessed for the first time, of all times, now is when your users are going to be accessing new resources, applications for which they never needed access, files that they never really access. All of that could be happening. So have a system that tracks user behavior analytics. And if there's an unusual logon, be notified, let the administrator know, let the respective stakeholders know. Working hours could be from 9 a.m. to, let's say, 6 p.m. in the evening, but all of a sudden there's an access at 3 p.m. or 3 a.m. Early in the morning. And this could be because users now have access to access your systems remotely. So you would tab on what sort of activity is going on with respect to logon. And if there's a deviation, you need to be notified. And when it comes to detecting lateral movement, a while back, we just understood as to how attackers can take advantage, and you should be notified in terms of being able to pinpoint or triangulate to is the IP from where this lateral movement is being initiated. What time is the lateral movement happening as we speak? Is there a specific user account that is under attack, or is this movement targeting only specific sort of resources? All sorts of insights around the activity, around the context of the whole attack needs to be available administrator solutions that give you that. Because most of the time, all these lateral movements are associated with getting hold of the domain admin credentials and then installing or executing applications or installing malware and exfiltrating data. So how do you go about tracking new installations that are being done? If there's a new exe that's run for the first time by a user that never really runs then you will need to be notified. Look for a solution that analyzes that part of the user behavior. And then you'd also want to keep track of privileges of the users. We do not want users with privileges to abuse them right now, because it's easily possible to get away with it, and you will need to know if privileges are being escalated for other users, or privileges that were never used are being used for the first time. Excuse me. This is more like being a little proactive about your whole privileged identity management, being able to protect before something bad could happen, and being able to stay on top. That's the recommendation that I have for you. Be able to look for solutions that can track privileged activity and notify if there is deviation from normal behavior. Also, I have two more tips for you. I'm going to be quickly winding up. I've given you a couple of tips so far. We were speaking about self-service for users. We started right there. We discussed about multi-factor authentication for users. We just saw single sign-on, setting that up, and we saw user behavior analytics set for users. The fifth tip is being able to give your users the right privileges. We just spoke about privilege abuse. So we want our users to get the access to all the necessary files and folders, but still not take advantage of the situation or grant it to someone who's not supposed to have it. So have systems that can automate the whole process of privilege granting or entitlement management. If someone needs access to a file or folder, have a system that has a workflow incorporated into it. Have a system that can have a ticketing platform associated with it. Maybe there's a request that comes in for a specific request that needs to go through a specific level of approval before it gets granted. Enough privileges, just enough access is something that you'll need to take into consideration right now. This is again a best practice that you can have in mind. Just enough permissions and just enough access for your users. In fact, if I were you, I'd set least privileges for every user at this time and grant them privileges only if it's absolutely necessary. So take that into consideration. So like I told you, if there are shared resources, you need to be able to track, you need to be able to check this. If this Office 365 resources, you should be in the know to keep track of the whole accesses, file integrity, copy paste activity that's going on, or any malicious deletion that's going on. You would be able to track. You should be able to track, and that's the kind of tool that you'll need to be looking for. And then the last bit of it, the sixth tip that I have for you for all IAM leaders right now, is being able to do it remotely as we speak. So you guys as well might be very much working from home as we speak. So how do you go about doing these management activities? Something as simple as a password reset. If you could do it remotely, that could be a great value add. And if you can do it from your mobile, nothing better than that. If you want to enable accounts, the ones that have like stringent disabling account, unlocking them, resetting passwords, changing group membership, look for solutions that does password management, account enabling and disabling, provisioning accounts. In fact, for that matter, you could very much do it from mobile apps like the AD Manager app. So we've given you practices. What I want you to do is look at solutions, not just AD 360 for that matter. This is just a recommendation that I have for you guys. There are multiple solutions out there. You do TFA that help FA. Then if you want all of this under one single dashboard, you could probably reach out to us and we'd be able to help you with AD 360. What we're doing is we're trying to help the community at this point in time. There are a lot of people out there who need support with respect to the self-service at least. So to start with, we've made our tool open. It's free for access. For the next 2 months, administrators would be able to take complete access to the tools that we just spoke about, the parts that pertain to self-service, password management, multi-factor authentication, single sign-on, tracking, user log-on, log-off, the whole deal that is associated with that we are giving away for administrators. So please drop a message right now on the chat, and we'd be able to we'd be more than happy to help you out with access to the tool. To sum it up, I'd want to give you one more tip. If you can look for a tool that does adapt to authentication, a lot of your problems are going to go away, because as your users are logging in remotely, if you can set stronger factors of authentication on the go, reducing the hazard based on the biometrics, based on the device range, based on the network to which they are connected to, based on the reputation of the IP, the whole deal of factor every single log entail, you'd be able to secure and safeguard your authentication better. So the adaptive authentication kicks in when there's a breach in the threshold. When there's a deviation from normal behavior, your identity solution is going to make the login a lot more challenging. Extra factors are going to come into the picture, and an attacker would not be able to log in without successfully clearing those extra factors of authentication. So give your users that provision, look for solutions that do adaptive authentication as well. So on the whole, I've given you a complete overview or a breakdown of IAM best practices that you can have in mind. We spoke about covering your users to self-serve themselves. We spoke about the criticality of setting up an MFA. A point that I gave you was to be able to use Microsoft Authenticator for free to set up MFA, just in case if you've not started setting up MFA. Setting up single sign-on to give them, your users, easy access to all applications at the same time, being it secure. Being able to track your user behaviors, because there are multiple attackers out there who are trying to take advantage of the situation. Be able to track your user behavior, activities happening, non-business hours, privileged accounts being accessed, privileges being used for the first time. We spoke about that. And the last bit of it was trying to enable administrators to do identity access management from a mobile application on the go as they are working from home, being able to reset passwords for users, being able to unlock accounts, being able to enable and disable accounts. That's the functionalities that you need to be looking for. So what I've done is I've kind of put together a couple of resources, ebooks that I've authored. One's around remote employee and remote password support. So this is the one that we authored very recently. It has best practices for remote users. We are also working on another ebook to help you double up your security and then password attacks. So a couple of ebooks and resources you'd be able to access this. Just drop a message in the chat right now, and we'd be more than happy to help you guys. So we understand these are and testing times of all resources or all business units in the organization. Ones that the toughest challenge is the IT administrators. In fact, they are essentially on the front line because they need to ensure business continuity, and this at the same time, if you're working on it, becomes all the more difficult to ensure not just your organization safety, but also there are millions of patients out there whose records are at jeopardy. So guys, we understand that there are certain shortcomings, and this was quite an unprecedented event, and most of us want to prepare for this, and we want to be by your side as you do it. So drop a message right now. We are making the tool available for the next 60 days, hoping that it does not extend any further. We hope and pray that the whole problem, is something that's forgotten and becomes a thing of a past in the next 60 days. And we're giving away the tool for the next 60 days. So do drop a message. Do reach out to us. Stay safe, guys. We are in this together. And thank you so much for having taken the time and staying through the entire webinar amidst all the trouble. I hope and pray everything is better the next time that we meet. You can write to me at j@manageengine.com. Thank you, guys. You've been such a lovely audience. Stay safe. We're in this together, guys. Thank you so much.